Orange Cassidy has new theme music. Christian has a new pet dinosaur. Jade might have a brand new baddie. And Blood and Guts was absolutely fantastic. I am GT Schwa. This is the wrap-up for the June 29th episode of AEW Dynamite, Blood and Guts. This was a fantastic night of pro wrestling. I loved it to tears. And this night was a really good example of, I loved Forbidden Door. I thought it was a great show, but I'm really happy that it's now in the rearview mirror. It's a thing we can look back on, because there's a lot of stuff storyline-wise and with certain characters that I feel like have kind of been on the back burner, and now we're getting back into. For example, opening match of the night was Orange Cassidy versus Ethan Page, and it's great to see American Top Team just in the position of obvious heels again. With everything with Sammy Guevara and Ty, and before that with Brandy and Cody Rhodes, they have been this weird black hole for like 5 or 6 months, and it's great to just have them in a position where, no, Dan Lambert is the clear bad guy. Nobody is cheering Dan. He's being a total dickhead on the side, and it was a really great match. Orange Cassidy unveiled his new music as well. And look, Where's My Mind, I'm always going to love as his theme song, just because it fits him so well. But I think the new song has a little bit more energy in it, it probably a little bit more exciting for him coming out. And it was also good to see a Chuck Taylor out there. We haven't seen him in a minute, and I know that there were some rumors going around that he had been released, or that his contract had been ended. So it's really great to see him out there again. He isn't gone, at least not for right now, and it looks like we're sticking with the best friends as a trio. I absolutely love to see that. Orange Cassidy ended up getting the win. He ended up stealing orange juice from Dan Lambert he was using to taunt, seemingly drinking it, but then having a little exchange with Ethan and then spitting orange juice, misting it all over Dan Lambert's face, and then getting the win. It was a great little opening match. I could see this being the feud for the next, month or two, having the best friends versus American Top Team, and I feel like that's a good idea, because it's a very obvious good guys, very obvious bad guys, and right now for both sides that is something that is desperately needed. So really enjoyed that. Up next, Christian Cage, the absolutely fantastic heel Christian Cage, comes out for a short interview segment with Tony Schiavone before a match that he has apparently asked for. Now, in this interview, you could tell that Christian had something to prove, because he comes in and immediately is like, oh, you thought what I said last week was messed up. He comes out and says something along the lines of, I was told by upper management to apologize about what I said to Jungle Boy about his father. Well, Jungle Boy, I am sorry. I'm sorry that the rest of your family isn't dead and they had to witness what I did to you. So he's just going for the throat. I love dickhead Christian. It is absolutely fantastic. He is doing such amazing work. And it really does feel like with MJF gone and all these other injuries going on, there is this perfect place for Christian to just slide into as the slimiest dirtbag in the company right now. But he unveils after that he asked for a match, but not for him. And we get the new Luchasaurus. New theme music, it was great. He has a new black mask, just like Christian being very direct with oh no, I'm evil now. And he has a great little squash match with Angelico. I loved this. It is simple. It is as simple as can be, but the stakes are being raised every single week. I'm loving Christian. He's being such an amazing heel, and now Luchasaurus as his big walking tank. I cannot wait for Jungle Boy to get back, for these two to see eye to eye. Up next was Jade Cargill versus Laila Gray with what I believe was her first match on television. She's had matches on Dark before, but this was her first match on television. She is not, from what I understand, a contracted member of the company, at least not yet, but we'll get to that in a second. This was a short and sweet squash match. Laila was a jobber for this. She got crushed very quickly by Jade, and it is always a pleasure to see her work in the ring. You know, I know not everyone loves Jade Cargill, but I'm not one of those people, and everyone I know is the same way. Anytime I reel friends or family or people I know to watch wrestling with me, Jade is always the person they are most impressed by. It's the person that they're most excited to see in the ring. And I totally get it. She has grown so much as a talent. You compare her ability in the ring and on the mic to even just a year ago, it is like night and day. But she has a great match, crushes Laila Gray with the Jaded. Then she takes the mic from Stokely Hathaway and basically is like, hey, I'm sick of fighting these jobbers. I want a real challenge. And that's a point that Hathaway confirms as well. He's like, hey, I'm right there with you. You know, Jade Cargill is having to have matches with people who haven't even filled out their W-2s for AEW. But people like Kris Statlander and Athena, they could have had this open challenge, but they didn't because they were too lazy. And then the both of them come out and we get a post-match brawl. It gets physical very quickly. And you can see on the side Stokely Hathaway speaking in the ear of Laila Gray. We don't hear what he's saying, but you get the idea that he's playing the role of the whisperer, being like, hey, if you help us here, this is a good chance for you to get noticed by us. You know, maybe you could end up being a baddie after this. And who knows if that's actually a thing that's going to happen, but it ends up working. She ends up coming in, helping Jade Cargill and them, and fighting against Statlander. She was definitely stomping on Statlander after the fact. You get the vibe that Cargill isn't super pleased with Stokely Hathaway just inviting people into their faction, but I really like this. I really like seeing the interactions going on here. This is a great example of how I feel the women's division isn't where it needs to be per se. It still feels like we don't get enough stuff with the women's division, but the last couple weeks it has been very well booked, you know, very clear story progression every single week. I'm really enjoying this. I'm loving this feud. I'm loving that clear factions and groups are forming now. And I'm really excited to see how this goes and to see Willow Nightingale hopefully joining Athena and Kris Statlander. You know, so super excited by all of that. After that, we had a backstage segment with Wardlow and Scorpio Sky, the two of them having a face-to-face, no physicality, confirming that they are having a street fight on next week's Dynamite to see who is going to be the TNT champion. This is where I think that we should be. You know, Wardlow's been fumbled a little bit, you know, ever since everything went kind of weird at Double or Nothing with all the MJF drama. I think that the TNT Championship is exactly what he needs to get him back on track. So at this point, we were an hour into the show when it's announced that JR is coming to commentary. Side note, whoever it was who made the choice to make JR only part-time on commentary tonight, thank you very much. I love JR. I love JR to tears. He's fantastic. He still has great calls all the time. But you gotta admit, he actively takes away from and hurts matches that aren't his cup of tea. You know, like comedy matches or really spot-heavy matches, just anything where the rules are more loosey-goosey. He can actively be a hindrance to the enjoyment of those matches. So I'm happy that instead of him being on commentary for most of the night, it was Taz there. Because Taz is fantastic. He is so charismatic. He busts me up laughing regularly. And him and Excalibur are a perfect dream team for AEW commentary. I really hope this is a long-term change where it's those two on Dynamite every week with a third or maybe even a fourth on there for individual matches. So back on track here. JR comes out. They announce that Blood and Guts is about to start. The cage lowers down. They have the rules for how this is going to be working, which I was very thankful for because this is my first Blood and Guts. I was not an active viewer this time last year, so this is my first time really getting to appreciate AEW's version of War Games here. This is basically what that is. And I'm just going to cut right to the chase here. It was fantastic. It was, like, Jesus, it was brutal. It was so brutal. It was glass and tacks, people going through tables. There were chairs. Skewers got pulled out. There was a fork going into someone's forehead. Kendo sticks and barbed wire bats. This was a brutal match, and I loved every moment of it. Not everyone is going to like how bloody and how aggressive it gets, but you know, they advertise it correctly. The entire night is called Blood and Guts. At that point, you know, you really should know what you're getting into at that point. It was an amazing match. A couple of big moments that happened. Obviously we had Jon Moxley with the fork on Daniel Garcia's face. I believe he did that again with, I think it was Angelo Parker, followed by a bunch of skewers in the head. There were people getting choked out with barbed wire bats. At one point, there were so many little points. I'm not going to go through the entire match because there were so many little moments. The big spots that I want to pull up here. First off, one big negative, because not everyone made it out of this unscathed in more ways than one. Santana, very early into him showing up, seemingly got injured. It seems like he must have hurt his knee or maybe blew out his knee or something, because very quickly into the match, he was not doing anything. He was on his side, and then I think he even rolled out, had to get out of the cage altogether. But that's a shame. At the very end, he didn't end up joining everybody else. That really sucks. I hope he has a speedy recovery. But as for other big spots, Eddie coming out and him with the kendo stick just like a lightsaber, just batting people away, hunting down Jericho. I love that at the center of this, with all this chaos, the central thread is still Kingston and Jericho, still wanting vengeance for what went down months ago. He brings in a bottle of, I believe it's rubbing alcohol or lighter fluid. Unfortunately, it doesn't get used. I have to imagine it's because of Santana's injury. Maybe he was supposed to get hit with a fireball or something, but it's really unfortunate in that regard. But outside of that, eventually people ended up on top of the cage. Sammy Guevara ends up getting thrown off onto a huge-ass table, and it looked really great. We didn't get a redo of what happened last year with the really obvious crash pad. It was a great jump off of the cage. Eddie versus Jericho, they were fighting. At one point, Claudio, who is fantastic, comes up and Matt Menard. Cool. Daddy Magic, Matt Menard comes up. Both of them get their submission holds. Eddie on Jericho and Claudio on Daddy Magic, Matt Menard. And they're stretching both of them, and Claudio gets his guy to tap out first, which is awesome. The Blackpool Combat Club and Eddie and all them win, but you can tell that Eddie was really disappointed that he was not the one to get the win. He didn't get his final moment of vengeance, and I really like how he played this out, because it wasn't cartoonish. It wasn't like he was like, oh, screw you, Claudio, I hate you completely. It was just a moment of genuine disappointment. Of and even afterwards, Claudio's trying to be like, hey, we won, and Eddie's like, man, I mean, yeah, I'm happy we won, and there's a point where they do fist bump, and he lets him help him up and stuff, and I like that, because it's clear that we're building something with the two of them. They have history long ago, I think in the Indies or on like a prior show they've been on before. So they have history. It's clear they don't really like each other, but it was nice seeing that little bit of camaraderie at the end in spite of the disappointment. I am super down for a feud with the two of them. And also it makes sense why Claudio is in this position, because Bryan Danielson easily could have been the one in that position as well. Also someone that Eddie kind of has beef with, but also they're on the same side. It's kind of screwy. It was a great match overall. Everyone else came up. They had their hands raised. Big win. The feud is finally over. I have to imagine it's over. And I'm really happy with it. I'm really satisfied. This was a fantastic episode of Dynamite. Half of the entire show was just the Blackpool Combat Club versus JAS match. But that was super fun, and it made the entire show go by super speedy. All the other segments were fantastic. For me, this is a 5 out of 5 show. If every show was at this quality level, that would be fantastic. But it was a really great show. It really felt like we're putting building blocks down for what we are doing for the next couple of weeks. So really excited about that. But what did you think? Did you see Blood and Guts? Did you enjoy it? I think the show was absolutely fantastic. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, though. Please subscribe, all that jazz. I will see you all in the next one. I am GT Schwa. I'll see you all later.